York, South Carolina. Around dinner time, February 4th, 2010, on the outskirts of town at the end of a long, winding driveway.
York County 911, you need police, fire, medical.
It was 7:30 p.m. when the call came into police dispatch.
This is in Castle. I've been robbed. He tied me up.
Between sobs, a female caller begged for help.
Oh, please come help me.
When the detective went up the driveway to the back of the house, he discovered a woman huddled in her car. She'd been bound in duct tape. She had duct tape around her head, some around her wrist. A few feet from a blue and white Suburban, police found a bloodied and lifeless gray-haired man. The man on the ground was Melvin Roberts, and everyone knew him. He was a former mayor of York, one of the town's wealthiest businessmen, and a defense attorney. The woman who called police to the scene was Julia Phillips, Melvin's longtime girlfriend. Investigators at the scene told Julia the news. Melvin had been murdered. The street where he lived was named after him, Roberts Avenue. Melvin had 2 sons, David and Ronnie. The 3 men are very close. They have lunch every day. Now, Melvin and Julia. They started dating 10 years earlier. He was divorced, and she had recently been widowed. Melvin helped Julia start her own business. He bought her own store so that she could sell her cosmetics and women's clothing. She opened the store in Gaffney, a nearby town where she had grown up. She called it Julia's. Later that night, still wrapped in duct tape, Julia told detectives the story of Melvin's murder. It appeared to be a robbery gone bad.
Back down on the ground and he said, if you say anything, I'll kill you.
But there was a lot investigators didn't have. Everything was taken from the scene. There was no cutting instrument, no rolls of tape, no gun, nothing. It was all gone. It was a cold February night. Detectives looked at Melvin's body. He had a couple of abrasions, one on top of his head, one on the side of his head, next to his ear. It appeared that Melvin had been shot at. The bullet had only grazed his ear. He also had a zip tie around his neck, and it was cinched tight. 79-year-old Melvin Roberts had been strangled. Police searched the scene and spotted their first clue. They found footprints back to Mr. Roberts' house. The footprints were in mud and muddy water, and they still had tread. Investigators believe the footprints most likely came from a man. They called in the K9 unit, hoping dogs could track down the killer if he was still in the woods around Melvin's house. The dogs have picked up on fresh scent. They go out to an adjoining neighborhood where the dog then loses the scent, which implies the person got into a car and took off. And that's where the trail vanished, leaving little else for investigators. Maybe Julia could help solve the crime.
Have a seat for me, Miss Julie.
She arrived at the police station, cold and shaken, with cuts on her arm and elbow, and bruises on her hands and face. But despite all the trauma, Julia told investigators she was ready to help find Melvin's killer.
I can see that man.
She took detectives through the details of the attack. It began behind Melvin's house, in the large circular driveway, surrounded by a red brick wall. She was getting groceries out of the back of her SUV when she realized she was not alone.
And that's when the man came. And he grabbed me, put his hand over my mouth, and shoved me to the back of the car and shoved me up against the car.
Then he made a demand.
He kept saying, money, money.
The next thing she knew, he was tying her up with duct tape.
And then he taped up my eyes, my mouth, put my hands together.
She said he dragged her 60 feet to the back of the parking area, behind the brick wall.
He drugged me to the brick wall, and he pushed me down.
Lying on the wet ground, she soon heard Melvin's car pull up.
I could see the car lights. And he pushed me back down on the ground, and he said, if you say anything, I'll kill you.
A short time later, she heard a violent struggle.
I thought I heard something like a pipe or something that somebody picked up.
Why do you think you heard something that sounded like a pipe?
I don't know, because I heard it hit the ground.
Okay.
And then I heard a shot.
You heard a shot?
It had to have been a shot.
After that, Julia didn't hear anything else. She stayed behind the brick wall, hoping the killer was gone, then made her escape.
And if the tape hadn't got wet from the rain, I don't know if I'd have gotten it off.
With the duct tape loose, she said she was able to use her car key to break free.
I let go of my car key.
He was laying on that concrete, and I knew that was him. And I knew in my heart that he wasn't alive, but I didn't want to believe it.
I'm the type of person who's up at 5 o'clock in the mornings reading my Bible, and I honestly believe that God protected me from all of this. I really do.
A few days went by, and the cops were no closer to finding the killer.
I'm driving home. I'm pulling my car here.
Police took Julia back to the crime scene so they could get a better picture of exactly what happened. They wanted Julia to show them where her assailant had thrown her in the mud.
Place me in a position like this.
They also wanted to revisit the sound of that pipe she heard. Detectives asked her to close her eyes and just listen.
Is that the type of sound that you heard?
Not exactly. Kind of with a dialect. You want American like I am speaking with English?
Once investigators took a closer look, the clues at the crime scene discounted the robbery gone wrong story. No money was taken. Melvin had about $400 in his wallet. Julia still had her money. It was a premeditated hit. So they had to hone in on people that knew Melvin and anybody had a beef with him. As detectives started looking into Melvin's relationships with people around town, they learned he had two sides. While he could be kind and generous, he also had an edge. He had no problem telling you what he thought of you or what you should do or what you could do better. He's also known to have a little bit of a temper. Police wondered if that temper might have given someone a reason to kill. They also took a close look at Melvin's business dealings. Besides being a defense attorney, Melvin owned multiple rental properties and a used car lot. Police asked Melvin's sons, Ronnie and David, to come up with a list of potential suspects, anyone who might have a grudge. The list had about 75 names, containing clients that he had represented or had a case against him, rental properties, evictions, repos, anything that anyone could have had a conflict with Melvin over whatever. He's been an attorney for 55 years. He has made people pay child support who may not want to pay child support, lose their children in a divorce. Julia said the killer had an accent, Indian type. There was a couple who had rented a house from Melvin. The husband had an Indian accent, and his wife had a nasty fight with Melvin. She had complained that the floor was cracking near the kitchen sink. Melvin told her if she wasn't such a fat ass that she wouldn't be breaking the floor. When the detectives went to the house to speak to the husband, the man told them he was at work at the time of the murder. Investigators set out to check his story. Police were also interested in Melvin's handyman, Gene Moss. David said he walked in on his dad and Moss having an argument in the office on the night of the murder. Gene wasn't doing what Melvin wanted him to. Then police got a break. They discovered DNA on the zip tie around Melvin's neck. They started swabbing suspects, hoping to find a match. Police learned that the angry tenant couldn't possibly be the killer. He was at work. His employer verified the time he was there and that he had not left and stayed until his shift was over. So he had an airtight alibi. Then there was the handyman, Gene Moss, who'd had an argument with Melvin shortly before the murder. The handyman had an airtight alibi too and was crossed off the list. Detectives were running into dead ends. They'd spent a lot of time delving into Melvin's life. Now detectives wanted to look into Julia's background. They took a ride 40 minutes west to Gaffney to check out her business. They discovered that the store started out as a big, fancy store, but then it just declined into a thrift store. Even more concerning was the reason Julia's store was failing. Investigators learned Julia had a problem with pills. She was taking money out of the till and buying prescription drugs off people off the street. She had a serious addiction. But it turns out Julia's financial troubles and pill addiction were no secret. A few years earlier, she went to rehab. It seemed to have worked. Julia told police that she and Melvin had a great relationship. She said she had planned a celebration for that night. Turns out it was her birthday, and Julia had a few surprises for Melvin. Melvin collected matchbook covers, and she had gotten him a few of those.
How was you and Melvin's relationship?
Great. It's sort of a private thing, but, Melvin, to be his age, was physically, active in every way.
But police thought there was something about the way she'd been wrapped in that duct tape that didn't sit right. The duct tape around her hands looked like she had held her arms out, and it was placed on there with care as to not hurt her. It was odd. The amount of duct tape that was around her feet did not match somebody who would be normally duct taped. It just wasn't enough of it. This got the detective wondering, was there anything else about Julia's story that didn't make sense?
Can I get some pictures right quick while we're in the warmth?
Now, we're gonna use these for Playboy?
No. And I really don't want to ask it, but I have to. Did you do anything to Melvin?
Absolutely not.
Investigators also wondered about the amount of mud on her clothes. During one interview, she said she had been dragged 60 feet and forced face down into the muddy ground.
And he's literally pushing it down into this mud.
So you would expect her to be covered in mud head to toe. All they got was, as if she had sat down in the grass. Her butt and her pant legs at the bottom of the pant legs were muddy, like if she had just sat down. The police weren't the only ones growing suspicious. Melvin's granddaughter, Emily, looked back on something that happened at the funeral home. Julia, who was there with her son Hunter, approached Emily. Immediately, she wants to tell her story about what had happened that night. Disturbingly, Julia's son knew the story better than she did. She said her hands were bound from behind. And he goes, "No, Mama, your hands were bound in the front." But when detectives went to verify one thing she was crystal clear on, alarm bells went off. Julia had told police she heard a gunshot and said she was nowhere near the gun. But forensic evidence told a very different story. A gunshot residue test was done the moment she got to the police department. Her hands come back negative, but it was on her sleeves. If she's 60 feet away behind the wall and the assailant is shooting him, gunshot residue is not going to travel 60 feet. An aha moment for the detective. When he added the gunshot residue on Julia's clothes to all the other parts of her story he found questionable, he was convinced Julia wasn't a victim. So 3 months after the murder, police arrested Julia Phillips in the parking lot outside her store and charged her with murder. Police and prosecutors didn't think Julia actually killed Melvin, but that she hired someone else to do it. The fresh footprints, that was really how police knew that she had someone else. There was one person who police learned was close to her, had a criminal record, and, like Julia, had a drug problem. Her son, Hunter. He was always involved with scams to get his pills. But Hunter had a solid alibi. He was with a former cop at the time of the murder, 40 minutes away, repairing his home computer. He was not in York at the time of the murder. Hunter was never charged. In fact, investigators couldn't find anyone to charge, and the prosecutor worried that would make this murder-for-hire case a tough one to prove. There is no evidence whatsoever linking Julia to a hitman. Nothing. Nothing in her bank records. There was no exchanges of any type. She kept her phone clean. There were no odd calls. After 3.5 years working to build a case, in August 2013, Julia Phillips went on trial for murder.
If you believe that the defendant is guilty of doing one thing, just one thing on the night Melvin Roberts was murdered, to aid in that murder, then she is guilty.
The prosecutor began by showing the jurors Julia's interviews with police. He wanted them to hear one of the first things Julia said on the night of the murder.
There you go. Can I get some pictures right quick while we're in the warmth?
Now, we're gonna use these for Playboy?
No.
Then the prosecution dropped a bombshell. They'd found a witness to testify that this was not the first time Julia had Melvin's murder on her mind. A police informant named Guy Blankenship, a man with a criminal past, claimed that a few years before Melvin died, Julia tried to hire him to do the hit. We had now an actual person who had heard her say that and even offered him money to kill Mr. Roberts. What was the motive? It could be found in Melvin's will. What did he leave her? The building and any car that she wanted from his car lot. The building was worth about $150,000. It housed her store, Julia's. In South Carolina, in a small community, that would take you far. It was $150,000? The state believed Julia was worried she was never going to see that money. The reason? The relationship between Julia and Melvin was over, said prosecutors, and she knew it. They put a friend of Melvin's on the stand to back up their claim.
He wasn't paying her bills anymore, and that he wasn't having anything to do with her. He wouldn't even touch her.
And in what prosecutors believed was the final straw, that witness told the jury Melvin had let Julia know he had booked a cruise with another woman. That must have really gotten under Julia's skin. He made it very clear to her she was being replaced. And it was no coincidence, the prosecutor argued, that Julia had Melvin killed on her birthday. It was Julia's birthday present. Now it was the defense's turn. They had an explanation for the duct tape, the mud, the gunshot residue. In the end, they said the state's case was all smoke and mirrors. The defense set out to show the jury a very different version of Julia. Her comments that seemed inappropriate, they argued, were just part of her quirky personality.
Now, we're going to use these for Playboy?
No.
After the man you loved just died, you're going to be making jokes about Playboy. I can tell you that she was traumatized. It's just how she is, and it's how she talks. They even told the jury that Julia was weird. Her conversation style is unlike most people. Weird was something to open the jury up to. She might be weird, she might be inconsistent, but she's not a killer. The defense also reminded the jury Julia was a victim. She'd been attacked, and as she told police, there was a perfectly good reason why that duct tape was loose.
And if the tape hadn't got wet from the rain, I don't know if I'd have gotten it off.
But wouldn't it have still pulled some skin or some hair? It was raining the night of the incident. So as it's raining, it's getting wet. It's not sticking as much as it usually does. And since it was raining that night, the prosecution had asked, why wasn't Julia wet and muddy? Easy, the defense said. She was. On the video, you can see her jeans are soaking wet. She's not dry. She's got mud all over her pants, which was from the rain and the dirt. The defense also addressed the gunshot residue found on Julia's clothes, which seemed to undermine her story that she was behind a wall, 60 feet away from where the gun went off. Julia's lawyer argued that there wasn't enough residue found on Julia to do an accurate test. If this had been the FBI lab, any of the military labs, they could not have testified there was gunshot residue because the number of particles found did not meet the threshold. Julia's defense team continued to pound home the notion that there was no physical evidence linking her to the murder. And if this was a murder for hire, they asked, where was the killer?
They built a case based on motive, not evidence. They want to say to you, we have no idea what happened, but we want you to guess and convict her. That is not how it works.
Next, the defense attacked the prosecution's star witness, Guy Blankenship, the man who said Julia tried to hire him to kill Melvin. They said he was a criminal and a liar, not to mention a police informant motivated by money. Finally, the defense had to counter the heart of the prosecution's case. Motive. The state claimed Julia feared she was about to be dumped and written out of Melvin's will. But her lawyer said they were still a happy couple. Just look at the lingerie Julia was wearing and the booze she brought with her that night. This was supposed to be a hot and steamy night. And the idea that Julia was broke and needed Melvin's money, also not true, said the defense. Julia's lawyer argued her family had plenty of money and was willing to spend it. Her family came and paid substantial attorney fees.
Substantial attorney fees.
The defense decided not to call Julia to testify. They said she was suffering from dementia. After 7 days of testimony, both sides rested. By the end of the trial, the question was not is she involved, but how could she not be involved? The jury took less than 4 hours to reach a verdict. She was found guilty of murder. Three years after her conviction, she died in prison. The hitman was never caught.